Okay, in the interest of keeping us on time, we're going to go ahead and get started tonight. Welcome, my name is Tracy Pavon, and I am Assistant Vice President for Enrollment and Financial Assistance at Simpson. And this is the first time I'm doing this financial aid night on a virtual basis. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. Allison Swanson from the admissions team is driving for me tonight, so she's going to be watching the chat box. If you have questions that you want to pop in there, you certainly can at any time. In the interest of just keeping distractions down, try to keep your mute button on. Feel free to use your camera if you want to, or you can hide yourself. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just going to kind of slide through the slides in somewhat of an unusual fashion. So I will warn you, I have a cough that I'm getting over, and so I'm probably going to have to take a lot of drinks of water tonight. Okay, with that said, tonight we're going to talk about financial aid and what you need to know. We're going to go over some topics tonight. What is financial aid? What is cost of attendance? Expected family contribution, EFC, financial need, categories, types, and sources, and specifically the FAFSA and special circumstances. So I want to certainly cover the things that you want to cover tonight. Financial aid basically consists of any funds that are provided to help your students and families to pay for their college education expenses. Cost of attendance, which is also COA, this is sort of an important number for you to understand. It includes the things that you will be billed for, okay? So your tuition and fees, your room and board, and then things that you may not be billed for, but they are expenses that are built into your cost of attendance, which means that if you need to borrow funds, you can borrow funds to cover these things as well. And those are things like books and supplies, transportation, and then the federal government actually allows us to build in a little bit of miscellaneous personal expenses because they know everyone has personal expenses. So these things vary. For example, a dependent student has a much smaller personal expense line than an independent student who might be supporting children and others. Expected family contribution is a number that you're going to hear a lot, and that is when you fill out your student's FAFSA, you're going to get back an expected family contribution. And the EFC, or expected family contribution, is really the amount that the federal government expects you and your student to pay in this year. So it's your ability to pay this year. And that's why you do a new FAFSA every year, because it's remeasured every year. It's basically a snapshot of your family's financial situation as it exists today. And that includes a student contribution and a parent contribution, which is why when you do the FAFSA, you're going to input demographic and financial data about both parties. Cost of attendance minus the expected family contribution gives you financial need. So this next slide is really my favorite slide because I think it's a really nice illustration of this. It gives you a comparable here. And on this slide, Simpson would be the red number 1, possibly University of Iowa or Iowa State would be 2, and maybe a community college like DMAC, the blue bar, okay? So your expected family contribution is the green number. I made that green because that's what you can expect to contribute financially. It remains constant. No matter where your student is going, that number's constant. So if you get a $5,000 expected family contribution, it's going to be $5,000 at Simpson, at Iowa, and at DMAC. But what varies then is your financial need at each school. So you can see the red bar, the yellow bar, and the blue bar, meaning that Simpson could award you more financial aid than possibly the University of Iowa, and yet even more than like DMAC, okay? Doesn't mean it will be the same price to go to all those schools, but I just kind of want you to understand that need-based situation. So categories of financial aid, there are need-based aid and non-need-based aid. We're going to talk about both a little bit tonight. Okay, and then the types. Really, there are 4 types of financial aid. Well, there's a lot of different financial aid, but there's 2 main categories. Gift aid, which is the good stuff. That's like the scholarships and grants that students don't have to pay back. They're not typically doing a lot of things to get those funds other than that they did a really good job preparing for a scholarship. Self-help aid would be something where the student is contributing more, so they may be paying back student loans when they graduate, or they may be working on campus. As an example, I have 7 students that work for me in my office, and they're paid monthly to do so, and they can use that money however they want to. Most of them do use it to help pay their college expenses. Okay, so scholarships, just quickly, we're going to cover, obviously, that's the good stuff. Your students may have applications at different schools that they need to complete to be eligible for those scholarships, and you just want to keep that in mind. Institutional scholarships. Your guidance office also probably is going to pass a lot of information on to you about scholarships as the time comes closer. That's typically happening second semester, March, April, May. Everything I know looks a little different this year, and hopefully we will be out of this crazy situation and your students can have a little more normalcy soon, but just keep your eyes peeled for those scholarships. Grants, those are typically based on the FAFSA, and that is going to be some of that need-based money that students, again, qualify for based on financial need, and they don't have to pay that back. We talked about work study a little bit. If your student is interested in a job on the campus that they are going to be attending, on the FAFSA, there's a question that says specifically, is the student interested in work study opportunities? And a lot of times families will say, well, I'm just not sure. You can absolutely put a yes in there. And if the student is awarded a job on campus, that is not a commitment to take that job. So they may end up not wanting that job in the long run, but if they think they might want to work on campus, they should at least indicate that. Most campuses, they're going to work minimal hours. And, you know, a lot of times it's minimum wage. Sometimes it's a little more, but that can help them with financing their education, obviously. And then loans. You can be guaranteed that as part of the financial aid package, at each school your son or daughter is considering, if they fill out a FAFSA, they are going to be awarded federal student loans. And the loan amounts vary. Freshmen are eligible to borrow $5,500 from the federal government, sophomores $6,500, and juniors and seniors $7,500. Okay. If you went to school, when I went to school, it was the old guaranteed student loan program. Now it's called the federal subsidized and unsubsidized direct loan. It's kind of the same program, just different names now. So your largest source of financial aid is the federal government. We've got states, colleges and universities, private sources, and employers. And we're going to cover these a little bit in detail throughout here. Federal government is the largest source. The aid that they award is mostly based on financial need. You have to apply each year using the FAFSA, and the eligibility requirements must be met. So again, that FAFSA, that free application for federal student aid that we're going to go over tonight, if you haven't completed it, is going to be your application for most of these things. And here are some of the student aid programs that are considered federal. We have the Pell Grant, the TEACH Grant, Iraq Afghanistan Service Grant, Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, also known as FSEOG, the Federal Direct Student Loan Program, Federal Work Study Program, and then the Federal Plus Loan. And the Plus Loan is a parent loan for undergraduate students. So as I said earlier, your students are going to get that small, like $55, $65, or $7,500 loan, but parents can borrow all the way up to that cost of attendance on one of the first slides where I said that you could actually borrow to cover your books and miscellaneous expenses if you need to. Different states have different programs. Residency requirements usually do apply. There are some merit aid and some need-based aid available through the state government. Most states use the FAFSA. In Iowa, we do use the FAFSA application, and the deadlines will vary, but in the state of Iowa, you've got to have your FAFSA submitted prior to July 1, and that's a long time, so I hope you have it done long before that to qualify for like the Iowa tuition grant. Iowa's application deadline, I already said that, is July 1st, and here are some of the state of Iowa programs. The Iowa Tuition Grant, which is for private schools, the Voc Tech Grant, and the KIBI Grant are both for community colleges and Voc Tech schools. The Iowa Grant is no longer around at this time, so I should have updated that slide. All Iowa Opportunity Scholarship is for foster care youth. There are education training vouchers also for foster care youth, and then Gear Up for those that are in the Gear Up cohorts. And then non-need-based state of Iowa funds would be the Iowa National Guard, the Governor Terry E. Branstad State Fair Scholarship, Robert C. Byrd, and then Iowa Teacher Forgivable Loan Programs. And then at colleges and universities, this is a huge source as well as the federal government. At Simpson, this is a much larger source for us than the federal government. We award aid both on the basis of need and merit. We also award self-help aid, which would be student jobs on our campus that we fund as well. and we also have institutional loans. We do use the FAFSA information for our need-based, and your deadlines will vary from college to college. So you want to be sure to check with each college what you're talking about. I can only give you the examples at Simpson. So for example, here, when a student is accepted for admission, right in their acceptance letter, it tells them what their academic scholarship is going to be. Then we layer this financial need information a little later as we get the FAFSA. What's the need-based aid look like to put together the total financial aid package? Okay. Private sources, these are the places your students can be researching to see if they find private sources, private scholarships. Great places to look would be like educational organizations, foundations, businesses, the church, civic organizations, like Lions Club, Elks Club, those types of things. Always look at your employer too. I know that there are a lot of big employers in Iowa who sponsor, especially the Des Moines area, sponsor scholarships for their employees' children. So you'll want to check to see if you have any such thing. And your deadlines and your applications on these scholarships are going to vary widely. So you want to begin researching those early. And now would be a great time for them to start to look at those. Again, employers, we talked about that a little bit, and they may also have education benefits for their own employees. So if you were looking at coming back to school with Simpson in your backyard in the continuing and graduate program, we would be more than happy to help you with that. And you might have an employer who even pays that for you. And then I always like to put up my don't get hooked scam scholarship thing here. There are a lot of scams out there, and just I would advise you, do not pay someone to find scholarships for you. Really, truly, I just don't think it's smart. Look out for things like you're guaranteed to get money if you pay this. We'll definitely award you a scholarship. These are things that are available to the community and free, so just be careful on that. Every year there is someone that fills out at FAFSA.com is a scam, and they charge to do a FAFSA, and your FAFSA will never even go in. So make sure you're always on studentaid.gov when doing your FAFSA. We'll talk about that in a minute more. So we're going to spend most of our time here now on the FAFSA since we went through those quick slides. So your FAFSA, your student's FAFSA, if they're a senior, can be done now. It's any time after October 1st of their senior year. So if you're a junior, you've got a year to think about this. Your FAFSA collects the prior year's information. So even though you're getting ready to do your 2020 taxes, you're going to use your 2019 federal tax information to do the FAFSA. And I always get asked this question, hey, I'd rather wait and use my current tax information because it's just a couple months away. You cannot use the 2020 tax information. You cannot legally do that. You must use the 2019 information. That is the legal nature of this form, okay? So it's going to collect a lot of demographic and financial information about you and your student. And again, it's going to use all of that data, put it into a huge algorithm and calculate the expected family contribution. And that's what we use to determine your financial aid eligibility. It's available in both English and Spanish. Colleges using that EFC to award their financial aid. Your student will list up to, I believe it's 10 colleges that they are interested in. And when you sign and submit the FAFSA, it will come straight to those colleges electronically. It is really important to remember that you're going to be signing up for an FSA user ID and password for both the student and one parent, okay? And you must have separate email addresses to do that. The federal government will not let you sign up for 2 FSA usernames and passwords at one email address, and that is a mistake we see people try to make a lot. So your son or daughter will have to have their own email address, and then the one parent will have to have their own email address, okay? Again, you can fill it out anytime after October 1st, so you're ready now. You're gonna be using the 2019 federal tax information, and different colleges might have different dates on that FAFSA, okay? Priority dates. So make sure that if you're narrowing it down, you know what those colleges and universities that you've narrowed down to, what their options are their priority deadlines. The free application for federal student aid is offered in a number of formats. There's FAFSA on the web, My Student Aid, which is a mobile app. You can do a paper or PDF FAFSA, FAFSA on the phone, and then there is an FAA access to CPS Online, and that's where you would have the financial aid officer do it for you. Largely preferred method is the purple, which is FAFSA on the web, okay? I have never done one on My Student Aid on the mobile app just because I'm old and my eyes could never see it. But paper version is going to cause huge delays for you. If you absolutely are not comfortable with the web, you could do the paper, but it's going to be a lot harder, okay? FAFSA on the web is the way you want to go. And honestly, this slide show really only talks mostly about FAFSA on the web because it's about 98% of people use that. Anyway, there's a lot of built-in edits, which I love. So one of the errors that we see with FAFSA is a lot of times families will say, okay, my adjusted gross income is $180,000, and then they'll put the same number in taxes paid. And FAFSA on the web would say, hey, wait a minute, your income's this and your taxes are this. I don't think you meant to say that, okay? There's great skip logic in there. The best example I can give you of this is if your child was born male and is registered with a selective service. If they're male, they have to be registered with the selective service if they're 18 to receive federal aid. So if when I filled it out for my daughter, it didn't ask me if she was registered, but when I filled it out for my sons, it asked me if they were registered. So again, that skip logic is going to avoid questions you don't need to do. There is an option to use, this is the best tip I'm going to give you tonight. So write this one down. But there is an option to use the Internal Revenue Service data retrieval tool, which is the IRS DRT, to import all of your tax data. I highly recommend this, but this is the biggest clue. Whoops, I didn't mean to go forward. This is the biggest clue I'm going to give you right here. When you do that, you're going to be typing away at your FAFSA and you're going to say, yes, I want to use the data retrieval tool. And it's going to say, you're now exiting the FAFSA. Then it's going to bring up another screen and says, you're now entering the IRS. And then another screen is this what you want to do. When you get to the IRS website, you are no longer pulling data. The two branches of the government talk, but they don't have legal authority to share data. So you're going to have to re-identify who you are on the IRS website. You will want to have your tax return right in front of you, and you will have to type in your address exactly as it is on your return. Okay, and I say that because it will not retrieve if you don't. I will use myself as an example. I live at Southeast 61st Street, okay? My tax return had the little ST behind 61, and I couldn't get it to match up because I wasn't putting that in on the retrieval. If your address is in all caps on your tax return and it's abbreviated ST for street with no period, you have to do it exactly like that. So most often you've typed in your federal tax return in all caps, but not always. And most often there's not a lot of abbreviating, like Avenue would just be AVE with no period, or spelled out Avenue. Just make sure you do it exactly as it is on your tax return. And that is really one of the best tips I can give you tonight, because people get frustrated with that when it doesn't work. More benefits, it's timely on the web. Your instructions are much more detailed, your help. You have the ability to check that status online to see, hey, where is this in the process? And it's also a very simplified application for future use. This is what FAFSA on the web looks like, just so you know when you get out there. You're going to go to studentaid.gov to get there, and then you'll go to apply for FAFSA on the web. Just a little bit here. When they log in, they're going to get a login screen right away, and they're going to say they're the student. This is what it looks like on the mobile app. Like I said, I've never done one on a mobile app. My eyes are too weak for that. But it's the same prompts and it follows the same logic as FAFSA on the web. So I think it's probably a great product and something that the kids probably love. The information is protected the same as it is on the web. You will put in a save key if you want to start it and complete it later, and that can be anything. It lets you know when you've completed each section. and it delivers it in little chunks and sections. It'll give you your confirmation the same as it does when you do it on the web, saying, okay, you've done this. Here's your EFC. Here's the confirmation that it's done. It will also send an email just like it does on FAFSA on the web to you saying that it's completed. And then back to that data retrieval tool a little bit. So I talked a little bit about this, but when you use the data retrieval tool, it will ask you if you want to transfer back your tax information, and it's going to transfer back a large majority of your financial questions, so you don't even have to go through them. And then it also notifies the Office of Financial Aid that, hey, this family used the data retrieval tool and they didn't change any of the answers, okay? When you fill out your FAFSA, roughly a third of all applications are selected for federal verification. And there's more paperwork involved than the FAFSA. Large and majority of families who do the data retrieval tool, use it, are not getting selected for verification. So that's an added bonus. Doesn't mean you won't be, but a lot less chance. Some tax filers cannot use the DRT tool. And these are those reasons. If on the FAFSA, if you didn't indicate that you'd already done your tax return, if you said, I'm not going to file, or I didn't file yet, you can't use it. Now, that would typically not be very likely since we're using 2019 tax return, but I'm just letting you know. If you were married after January of 2019, it won't use it either, because it's not going to be able to, you're going to have to pull two separate tax returns in. You wouldn't have been able to file married filing jointly if you were not married prior to January of 19. If the first three digits of the Social Security number are 666, you won't be able to. If you filed a non-US tax return. For married couples, if they did not file jointly, if they filed separate returns or head of household, you won't be able to use the DRT, because again, we're going to have to combine two tax returns. If the parents didn't provide a Social Security number that is valid, they won't be able to. And if they entered all zeros for Social Security numbers. Again, we talked a little bit at the beginning about needing a user ID and a password. That's completed at the FSA ed.gov website. And that is, again, you'll want an FSA username for the student and for the parent. And that username and password acts as your electronic signature on the FAFSA, okay? So just a heads up that if you do your FAFSA, and then let's say that your son or daughter was not looking at Simpson, we can't imagine it, but let's say they weren't. And then down the road, they decide, hey, yeah, I really did want to look at Simpson. So you go back and add Simpson. Again, you both have to sign that FAFSA. Even though it was just adding a college, you're actually giving the authority to the federal government to release your pertinent personal information as well as your son or daughter's. And so that's why both signatures are required. Any change you make to that FAFSA, you're going to have to make that both of you sign. Again, with the FSA user ID and password. There is a FAFSA on the web worksheet available that follows the same logic and kind of gives you an idea of what to expect. You can print those actually if you want to. Honestly, I don't think you'll need it if you just follow the help as you need it for FAFSA on the web. You should be good. So the demographic general information that it's going to go through first, it's going to ask for information about the student, their Social Security number, their citizenship status, marriage status, drug conviction or possession of possession or sale. This would be if a student has a drug conviction with the intent to sell that can impact their financial aid eligibility, they would have had to complete a rehab program. Hopefully that won't apply, but if it does, there's a process and a worksheet it will take you through to see if the student's eligible. Selective service registration, we talked about that a little bit. If they're 18 and male, they will have to be registered with the selective service. If they are not, they can do it right here on the FAFSA. It will ask highest education level completed by both mom and dad. There are some first generation scholarships here and there, and so colleges need to know that. Student dependency status. There's a series of about 10 questions that have to do with the student's dependency status, whether they are a dependent student in the federal government's eyes or an independent student. And this is a huge question we get asked a lot. A lot of times parents will say, hey, I don't claim them as a dependent on my tax return, so I don't have to be on the FAFSA. That's not true. The FAFSA, the federal government makes it really, really hard for students to be independent. The questions are primarily if the student is married or they're a veteran, they have their own children that they provide more than 50% of the support for. They were homeless. They were an unaccompanied youth. Both parents are deceased. They were in foster care. Those are some of, or they provide 50% of the support for another dependent, like if they were supporting and could prove that they were supporting 100% someone else other than themselves, like a grandparent. Those would be the reasons that a student could be independent and not provide parents information. Otherwise, if they answer no to all of those questions, which is probably going to be the case with the students that we're talking about, that means they are dependent in the federal government's eyes and they have to provide their parental information on the FAFSA. So then the information about the parents, you're going to have some of that same demographic information, and then it's going to talk, it's going to collect tax, income, and other financial information, dislocated worker status, whether the parent is the recipient of a means-tested federal benefit, their assets, and their untaxed income. Same information on the student, very same information they're going to collect. And then the college information, we talked about that, and the housing plans. A couple of things I want to go over on things that I'm not sure we're going to hit later. I'm going to come back to that. Let's go ahead and finish this first. Okay. So the college information, what colleges they're looking at, if they're going to live on campus or with their parents. If you paid someone to prepare the FAFSA for you, that would go in there. Otherwise, you skip that FAFSA prayer section. Signatures that are required, again, we'll have one parent signature and the student signature. So again, you're going to use that FSA user ID and password for the student, and then one for the parent, and so sign and submit your FAFSA. This is where I want to spend the majority of time. FAFSA errors, you can make an error and it can be fixed. It can always be fixed, but it does slow things for you, and some errors are harder than others. The most important thing for you to do is get the Social Security numbers right. Once you submit, when you submit your FAFSA, it is going into all different federal databases. It's going out to Department of Homeland Security to make sure you're an eligible citizen. It's going out to the Social Security Administration to make sure that your birth date, your Social Security number, and your name match. The biggest mistake we see is transposition of Social Security numbers. So you transpose one number, or we see a lot of times like mom's filling out the FAFSA and she puts her number in the student's name. Well, that's not going to match up. And the SSN causes huge problems. So double, triple check the SSN for the student and both parents and the birth date to make sure you have the right name with the right social with the right birth date. Divorced, widowed, and remarried parents. This is a big question we get a lot of times. So we have so many different family situations right now. And in the case of a divorce and a remarried situation, let's say that I am divorced from my child's biological father, and I'm remarried. I've only been remarried 3 days, but I'm filling out the FAFSA. My daughter lives with me. I use my income and my new husband's income, even though I've only been remarried for 3 days. Okay. It is the student. The student is providing information about the parent that has more than 50% of their support or custody. And if a lot of times people will say, my husband and I split it 50-50. He lives here 1 week, then with me 1 week, then there 1 week, then here 1 week. And if you called the federal government, first of all, they would literally tell you there are 365 days in a year. So somebody gets that child more than one, more than 50%. But I would tell you, if it really is a back and forth situation, typically it comes down to who does the student live with. But if it's a back and forth situation, then you're going to have to figure out who provides more than 50% of the support. Okay. That may come down to who provides insurance. I don't know how you're going to determine that, but you have to determine that. And it is that person that goes on the FAFSA and that person's spouse if they're remarried. Income earned, that's oftentimes a mistake. You have an adjusted gross income number, and then you have income earned, and you need to break that down. So let's say that, just for easy calculation, that it's a married situation. Each parent makes $50,000 for an adjusted gross income of $100,000. You'll want to put $100,000 in the AGI category and then $50,000 under each earnings from work. Again, if you're popping that stuff over from the IRS data retrieval tool, you're not going to have to put very many of those numbers in. But it's important that you split the income appropriately per parent. Okay, it is calculated a little bit differently for one working parent than two. Untaxed income, this is an area that gets a lot of mistakes. That would be any income that's not taxed that you received in 2000, the year that's on the FAFSA. So that would include untaxed income, what you contributed in a 401k or a 403b in that year, okay? It does not mean what's in your retirement accounts, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, okay? Your U.S. income taxes paid, I told you earlier, a lot of people make a mistake on that. Household size is going to include if you have 3 children in college and 2 people at home, but those kids in college, you think, well, they don't really live with us anymore. You count them. So you would have 5 in the household and 3 in college. The household includes who lives in your house when they're not in college, basically. And the number in college obviously includes who's in college in that household. You never include the parents on the number in college, and the FAFSA will tell you that. So you've got to be careful with that, all right? Real estate and investment net worth. There is a really good description on the FAFSA that tells you exactly what to include, but you do not include the home that you live in. Real estate would be if you own a second home or if you own rental properties or things like that. It's not the home that you live in. And your investment net worth does not include your retirement accounts. So at Simpson, I have a 401k. I would never include the cumulative 401k amount, but I do have to include up there under the untaxed income bullet what I contributed in that year on a pre-tax basis. And that will be on your W-2. It's in boxes 12 or 14, depending on how yours is recorded. It tells you exactly on the FAFSA. It's found in this box, and it's anything coded with these letters, okay? It's really hard to present to a screen, guys, so I hope I'm not going too fast. That FAFSA is then sent to, from the central processing system, which is what the CPS is, to the college and to the student at the same time. The college gets an ISER and the student gets a SAR. The ISER is the Institutional Student Information Request, and the SAR is the student aid record for the student to review. This is what it looks like. I know you probably can't see that. I can't, but this is what the SAR looks like. So it'll come via email to your student. And it's basically one more chance for them to look at everything, because over on the left column, even though you can't read it, is the question, and on the right would be their answer. So it's just a nice chance for them to review it and go, yep, this looks great. So you might want to look for that. They'll send a paper SAR. If you didn't provide an email address, you'll get it in the mail. Otherwise, you're going to get it via email. So email's much, much quicker. I just did my daughter's, and we had it like within 24 hours, so really quick. And this is what comes to the institution. And this is like 18 pages of data. This is what we use to do our financial aid awarding with. Making corrections. Again, if it's necessary that you go in and make a correction, you can do it. Go right back into FAFSA on the web, and you'll update it there. Again, anytime you change anything, both you and the student has to re-sign. And then the colleges will ask for additional documentation if needed. So this would be a great example. If you transpose the Social Security number for a student, or something didn't match up, the college is going to help you to resolve that. And we're going to need copies of the SSN and the birth date, so we can make sure, yep, this is a valid student, and we're going to help you to fix that. But that might be something we would ask for. Earlier, I told you a lot of students are selected, about a third, for federal verification. And that's where the government is saying, hey, just college, check out this FAFSA, make sure it's right. Something doesn't look right, or we're just randomly selecting this person because we have to verify roughly a third by law. So you may be asked for additional information, your tax returns, those types of things, and that would be why. I want to spend more time on this slide than I would normally. The FAFSA is a legal document. You must complete it using your 2019 income. Doesn't matter if you've got your 20 laying right in front of you, you have to use your 19, okay? You cannot stray from that. But every college has the right to look at your information if you have something that needs to be appealed and make a decision whether or not they will override that, okay? I want to be really cautious to tell you that I have the authority to override a FAFSA for Simpson and Simpson only. So if your child is looking at Simpson and Iowa State, I can override Simpson's FAFSA. I cannot legally override Iowa State's FAFSA. That is up to the professional opinion of their financial aid office. So if you have a special circumstance, you will need to reach out to each and every college that your student is considering, okay? I'm going to give you some examples. We are being hit with more special circumstance requests than we have ever in history in my 30 years been hit with, and that is because of COVID. A lot of incomes don't look the same right now as they looked in 2019, okay? So if you came to me and you said, yes, we had to use our 19 FAFSA and this is how that looked, but let me tell you what it looks like now. It has changed with appropriate documentation, and it requires a lot of documentation. I can override that FAFSA, okay? That's one example. Another example might be, we've had in the past, oh gosh, this was a number of years ago, but when the polar vortex came through, we had a parent who was a window salesperson and absolutely had the best year ever because so many people needed new windows that year. And, you know, said, hey, I can give you 5 years of income. This is an anomaly. And we can average your income over 5 years if something like that happens. We look at this a lot of times for farm families. Sometimes if it's a drought or a bumper crop or whatever, medical situations, we can look at those types of things. So just be aware that if there's something going on that you think, gosh, this FAFSA does not show this at all, reach out to the financial aid office and ask them. They can tell you yes or no. And just because I do it at Simpson doesn't mean that somebody at Iowa State's going to do it. We all have slightly different circumstances and slightly different things that we feel we can look at, okay? But I think it's really important this year for you to understand that this exists because, like I said, a lot of family situations have changed, and our federal government wants us to be fair and encourages us to look at you in a different light if something like that has happened, okay? And so here are some examples of special circumstances. God forbid, the death of a parent or a spouse, loss of employment, divorce, secondary school tuition, extraordinary dependent care. So maybe you have a grandparent that lives with you and you are paying extraordinarily high expenses for that. Unusual medical and dental expenses. On the divorce one, I do want to spend just a minute. A lot of families get child support for a child until they are 18 or graduate from high school. You do have to report your child support on the FAFSA. That is a pretty common one for a financial aid administrator to remove that income. Okay. And this screen I'm just going to leave up while we ask questions, and I'll leave up the next one too in a minute. Places for help, obviously your guidance office, they're on here today and they may want to say a few words. I'm going to certainly make sure that they can do that. I just jumped in. This is an unusual setting and my first time doing this way. So call the college financial aid office where your student is looking. The Iowa College Student Aid Commission is a great source for you. And I cannot say enough about ICANN, Iowa College Access Network. ICANN will do your FAFSA for you free. They are doing them virtually right now and not in person, but they are scheduling appointments online. They do a great job. They're mostly financial aid administrators who have kind of gotten away from the college stress and gotten into Iowa College Access Network. Great, great company. And they have a great website, icansucceed.org, where they are promoting a lot of scholarships. So they have some great search tools there. I highly recommend that you take a look at that. And if you need help with your FAFSA, they're wonderful. Okay. You also have us in your backyard, and we're more than willing to help you with FAFSAs and with questions at any time. That's what we're here for. So if you need help, you can just give us a call or email us and we can try to help you. We can do FAFSAs in the office right now. We are not doing FAFSAs online. If you want to do it online, I'm going to send you to ICANN. Like I said, they're amazing. So, okay. So that is what I wanted to cover tonight, and I am going to open it up to questions. You can either chat a question or you can unmute yourself and just ask it. It does not matter to me how we proceed with questions and answers. I just want to make sure I get your questions answered. I don't see any, so please, I'm going to forward right down here. If you have a question that you maybe don't want to ask in the group, you can also email me. My email is the second one on there, tracy.pavon@simpson.edu. Thank you so much. Everyone have a great and safe evening.